Hi everyone and welcome back to the Career Clinic. I'm Jo.
And I'm Emmy, and we're so excited to have you with us for today's episode.
If you've ever wondered what employee ownership trusts or EOTs are all about, how they work, what they mean for employees, and why more businesses in Wales are moving towards this model, then you are in exactly the right place.
We're joined by three brilliant guests who live and breathe employee ownership. First up, we have Branwen Ellis, a specialist employee ownership consultant at Cwmpas, helping businesses plan for sustainable succession through employee ownership.
We're also joined by Rhodri Packman, part of the EO team at Cwmpas, who's passionate about promoting the benefits of EO across Wales and supporting organisations through the journey.
And last, but certainly not least, we have Christina Evans, HR, Recruitment and EDI Coordinator at Aber Instruments, an employee-owned business. Christina shares her real-life experience of what EO looks like from the inside and the impact it has on culture, inclusion and recruitment.
It's a conversation full of insight, laughs and practical takeaways. Whether you're an employee, business owner, or just curious about new ways of working.
So grab a cuppa, get comfy, and let's dive into the world of employee ownership.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking the time out to be part of this episode. We're super excited to learn more about EOTs. So to start off, actually, we thought it would be really good to explore what employee ownership actually means.
So employee ownership, we would say that a business is employee owned, if you like, if they're partly or entirely owned by the majority or preferably all of the employees, and that would usually be the case. You mentioned the word EOT there. For any friends that might not be familiar with that language, EOT stands for Employee Ownership Trust, and that's a sort of indirect model of ownership. So, but to put it simply, a business can become employee owned in a couple of ways. First one, or the more traditional one previously, was when employees might be invited to purchase shares in the business, or they buy into the business, or collectively buy the business from the owners, which would require usually the employees then to sort of find that money personally to purchase those shares unless they were gifted them. But the most common form of ownership now is the employee ownership trust, and that's an indirect ownership model. So basically means that, the employees can become essentially like beneficiaries of an employee ownership trust. So they become indirect co-owners, if you like, of a business without having to put any money into it. It's by far the most popular model of employee ownership now in the UK. It's, particularly sort of prevalent since, I'd say the last 3 years, where there's been a huge growth in the sector. But you can also have a hybrid model as well. So you might find some employee-owned businesses that, maybe have an element of their share structure owned by employees directly, and then the other sort of proportion of shares owned by an employee ownership trust. And you've got a number of examples of sort of employee-owned businesses in the UK that have a variety of those different models.
And I think a lot of us are mainly familiar with, John Lewis, for example.
Absolutely.
Everybody, when they think of employee-owned trust, they think John Lewis.
Yes.
But we are hearing more and more, and, luckily at Hope, amazingly, we're an employee-owned trust now, which we're really excited about. So, it's wonderful. What do you think is driving that trend, Branwen?
Yes, good question. I mean, you mentioned John Lewis there, and I think for a while we were calling it the John Lewis model, and that was sort of, the most well-known sort of example of if you like, a sort of an employee-owned business. By now, you've got other big names that, you may have seen, or your listeners may have seen on the high street, like Richer Sounds, here in Wales, we've got Tregroes waffles. You might have seen those lovely waffles, absolutely delicious, in the supermarkets. You've got Admin Animations, creators of Shaun the Sheep, Riverfoot Organic. So these might all be sort of names. Go Ape is another one that people have come across and may not have realised actually that they are employee-owned. And there's over 2,300 now in the UK.
Wow.
So not only has the number of employee-owned businesses grown in the UK, but the rate of growth as well has sort of increased, if you like, so that rate of growth has increased significantly over the last 3 to 4 years. So coming back to your original question, why is that? Well, first of all, I mentioned earlier that the Employee Ownership Trust is the most popular model, and that came about in 2014 with the Finance Act on the back of the Nuttall Review. So basically, the UK government provided an incentive, if you like, for business owners to actually consider transitioning into employee ownership. So they said that, based on certain conditions that had to be met, if a business owner sold a majority sort of shareholding to an employee ownership trust, they would get capital gains tax relief. And that was designed really to try and encourage take-up of the model.
Yeah.
It was still relatively sort of a well-kept secret, if I can put it that way, back in 2014 for a couple of years, until more and more business owners got to know about it and advisors like us to get the word out there. But I think as more businesses have gone down that route, there's more sort of talk of the model in sort of newspapers, even on the television. So you almost feel like we're getting to a tipping point, And specifically here in Wales, we've been very lucky to have sort of Welsh Government put it into the programme for government to sort of double the number of employee-owned businesses. So that's really helped us to get sort of resource to support business owners here in Wales. So it's great now that we're well on our way to having 100 employee-owned businesses in Wales as well.
Wow,
that's amazing.
Cwmpas obviously being one of the lovely ones that we worked with.
Yeah, and that is a lot more than I realised actually. So fab.
So Rhodri, from an employee's point of view, what are some of the key financial benefits of working in an EOT business?
There are lots, but let's take the example of an employee working in an employee-owned business, and as Bran has outlined, the EOT model. And there are really some strong financial benefits that set it apart from the way traditional businesses are usually run. So first off, and one of the biggest perks, and probably the headline grabbing fact that most people know about EO and EOTs from an employee's point of view, is the ability to receive bonuses.
Wow.
And one of the nice things about it is that it's distributed fairly across the workforce. So unlike some other bonus schemes, it's not just reserved for the senior leadership team. It's not just reserved for managers. Everybody gets it, regardless of your job title, regardless of your role. Now, you might get more and have to pay tax on it. You might get less. But all of that is obviously dependent on the ability of the business being in a financial position to be able to pay that bonus. You may get nothing at all.
Right.
That's just how it works sometimes.
Yeah.
But the trust has it set up that the bonus is there for you if it can be afforded. So that's a direct financial benefit. But employees can also benefit indirectly as well. So EO businesses tend to be more financially stable over the long term. And research has shown, and COVID was a prime example of this actually, that EO businesses tend to weather downturns a lot better than non-EO businesses. They avoid layoffs, they could be more resilient, they have more buy-in from the workforce, and obviously that means there's more job security and more consistent income for employees. And it makes a real difference. And I think finally it's worth mentioning that within EO businesses, there should be a culture of transparency and involvement. So as an employee, you will have more insight into how the business is performing financially. You will have a say in how those profits are used. Now, they could be reinvested back into the business. You could be using it to impact your local community, or using it to improve staff benefits for everybody in the business. So I guess I would say that, yeah, there's obvious and meaningful financial benefits for being an employee in an employee-owned business, certainly in your paycheck, but also in terms of longer job stability.
Yeah. And you have that vested interest, don't you? If you own a piece of that company, naturally you are going to be more invested in it and want to know more about the figures, the numbers, the forecasts, where we're going to be in 10 years' time. Yeah, and we talk a lot, you know, obviously working in recruitment, we talk a lot with organisations about engagement and retention.
Yeah.
So the research then, Rhodri, that tells us that people are more likely to stay if an organisation is an EOT then.
It does. It highlights that quite strongly. And I think in the world of HR, and you will know this yourself in recruitment, in terms of people management, there's a concept that looks at the way people connect with their work, and it's called psychological ownership. And I'm sure you've come across this, and many of the listeners will have heard about this. And when we talk about psychological ownership, we're not referring to share ownership or financial bonuses or some sort of structure or legal contract. We're talking about a feeling, a belief. And you mentioned it just now, but the belief that the company you work for is actually yours. Whether you own it or not, you have this feeling. And that's a hugely powerful thing within businesses. It's about pride, about responsibility, about being something bigger than just your job title. And I guess we've always seen this as being part of the culture of the business. And there are obviously thousands of non-employee owned businesses out there that have an amazing culture and have amazing staff buy-in. And I'm not suggesting that a business with a terrible culture can suddenly be turned around by a technical diversion to employee ownership. But within EO businesses, that psychological ownership is obviously much more prevalent. And it's down to how the business is structured, down to that trust. All employees are now beneficiaries of share ownership. So it's a real ownership as well as a psychological one.
Yeah.
And within that EO structure, as you are finding out yourself being an employee-owned business, there's more of an imperative for an employee voice, more engagement, more involvement in decision making. Yes, you get the financial benefits, but there's a sense of that shared mission that you all belong to, and you're all driving the business forward together.
Yeah.
And that's hugely powerful. And when it's done properly in an EO business, and EO owners have done it for the right reasons, it transforms that traditional employer-employee relationship into something more like a partnership.
Yeah.
Take John Lewis, for example. It's a partnership. It enhances motivation. It enhances job satisfaction. It improves well-being, and obviously delivers on businesses' objectives as well. So they're not just nice to have, it actually improves the business's bottom lines. And research actually does back that up. So there's research by the Employee Ownership Association in the UK, and research that we ourselves have commissioned in Wales that shows employee-owned businesses report higher productivity. They have better staff retention and stronger long-term performance. And it's not down to the fact that they can give out tax-free bonuses. It's about because the employees that work there and the structure of the employee-owned business means people care about their role. They care about the employee-owned business they work for. And that's reflected in them staying longer, working harder, feeling more fulfilled. And also the business can then use that as a tool to recruit new and exciting talent.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, and that's so true. And I definitely noticed that at Hoop, that we are all working towards the same common goal across all areas of the business. We are completely unified. So it's definitely done that for us. Emmy, would you agree?
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
And that's an exciting feeling.
Yeah, it is. It is. And you've articulated it so well, Roger, because it is the psychological benefit. It's not the financial. It is all down to those psychological benefits. And it's that thing that gets you up in the morning and makes you, want to go into work. And Christina, obviously, you work in an EO business as well. So, you understand it just like us and are experiencing it. Based on your experience, what is it like for you, day to day working in an employee owned organisation, would you say?
So I'd say, I think I'd go back to the start of my journey. So I work for Aber Instruments, and in my previous job, I used to arrange work experience. So I came as an external person to Aber Instruments, and it just had this wonderful feeling of togetherness. Everyone was really helpful when I came in. Everyone asked me, "Can I help you? Can I help you?" You know. And the offices that we came to in Aberystwyth, we don't have very many big offices, but it looks so clean and wonderful. And compared to offices that I'd seen in Cardiff Bay in my role. So the atmosphere, as an external person, I felt that as I came in. So when I was approached by the HR director now to apply for the job, and I was quite happy in my previous job, so it was quite a wrench really to think about it. But I thought, oh, let's give it a go, because it's such a positive environment, and everything she told me about working for an EO company, it was hard to believe that it was true, actually.
Yeah.
So I thought, test this. But it is true, and now I'm doing the same for other people, enticing people to come and work here. So it's a very positive environment where people are always willing to collaborate and help each other, however that might be. And what I found, definitely to start with, that you can always ask the silly question. Sometimes the question you think, I don't know, especially in a technical, business. I'm not an engineer, obviously. I don't come from that background. I don't understand software or how code is written. But people, will take the time to explain how this affects our instrumentation, and that's really helpful. And we all come together and celebrate our successes. I think it's a feeling of togetherness, that really, really enticed me to come and work for Aber Instruments, and that's the day-to-day feel every day.
Oh, that's amazing, because that's very similar to what we've got at Hoop as well.
Yeah.
And myself and Joanna on the HR and Professional Services division, we've got our nursing division, our education division, and we actually we have a big meeting every month, don't we? And we always celebrate each other's successes. And I think when so we've always done that, but when Employee Ownership Trust was brought to us, I don't think we understood it as much, wasn't it, when we first?
I think, what would you say, 90% of the people in the room hadn't. Yeah, I think you have to live and breathe it to then realise that, no, it is true. And it's not just words, it's true.
No, definitely. And now it's embedded the togetherness even more than we had before, because we've always had it, like you said, Rhodri, earlier. You can't just put this together, you can't just put this forward if your culture's not there. It's something we've already had, but it's just enhanced it. Going back to you, Christina, do you feel employee ownership gives people more of a voice in shaping the direction of the business?
Definitely. And that's something that's really exciting. I think coming from a background of working from organisations which were quite slow at moving forward, that was the exciting part really of coming to work for Aber Instruments. So for example, in February 2022, we all had a week of when we all got together and decided the direction of the business for the next 5 years, which I think is quite unique. And it was lovely.
Oh, wow.
For all of us to be together and share our ideas, and then that was put forward, and now we work to that constantly on a 20 quarters achievement. So I think that's really, really important. And I think from that we talked about being transparent and sharing information. So twice yearly we get together and have a business meeting, so we can understand really, even though we can access the figures and see our sales, we can have an in-depth sort of knowledge of how we're doing as a business, what direction we take, what should we move forward with, what should we, maybe, currently we have a slight pause on recruitment. We have recruited a lot in the last 3 years. It's been, I think about a third of our business has been recruited in the last 3 years, so you can see how busy that was. But we're on a slight pause at the moment. And, these are the things that we decide together, that we decide are important for us. So we're not, using our resources, exponentially.
Yeah, amazing. And it's that transparency as well, isn't it? Like you say, when you're having the meetings and you know exactly what's going on in the organisation that you're working for, that also provides trust.
Definitely. It is all about trust, I think.
Mm-hmm.
We have quite a long recruitment process. We like to make sure we meet people several times.
Yeah.
We like to make sure that they have the right feel about them, and I know you can't quantify that, but we need people who come to us who are going to be humble, who are going to work together, who are not going to be hierarchical, who are going to accept people at the lowest or highest level and treat them exactly the same. And that's what employee ownership, I feel, is about. It's about all being together, working for a common goal, and that's why it's so important, really, to get the right people in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have a question to ask each of you, which is what would you say is one surprising thing that you've learnt since being involved in or working within an EO business? So what's been the most surprising thing? What surprised you the most about, EOTs and employee ownership? Branwen, if you want to go first.
Yeah, sure. That's a good question. I think probably sort of as an advisor, I work with business owners at that stage where they might be thinking about retirement, for example, and looking at their options to, sort of, I suppose, sell the business and move on. Albeit we are seeing more sort of business owners actually sort of transitioning to employee ownership much younger now because they know, they've heard about the benefits and like what it's about. But I think what surprised me the most is that I suppose with there being such an interesting tax incentive, I think it would be quite natural to sort of think that would be the main reason, or at least, a significant reason for business owners going down this route as opposed to maybe selling to, a third party, doing a trade sale, which would be more traditional. But I've actually been really pleasantly surprised over the sort of 5 years that I've been working with business owners to see that actually, yes, while a tax incentive is a nice to have, it isn't actually the driver, and that's been sort of really heartwarming for me personally to sort of hear business owners time and time again saying actually it's about the legacy, it's about making sure that the business remains autonomous, that I'm looking after my employees, that they've been part of this journey with us, and yes, they do get a fair price for their business, possibly not as much as they would in a trade sale, but they're also very keen to sort of, stay in that business to help give it a little bit of continuity for a period of time. They're willing to sort of take their money out over a longer period of time to sort of make sure that there's no undue pressure on the business. So all of that has been a pleasant surprise for me, really, to sort of see that actually how much business owners really care about the people that that work for them and the business that they've collectively created together. I would say.
And it's their legacy. That's lovely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, really nice. What would you say, Rhodri? What's been the most surprising thing for you?
I would kind of back up what Bran has said, really. I mean, a transition into employee ownership is a very structured thing. There's a process you have to go through. It's quite laborious at times. And I guess part of my role, getting caught up in facts and figures and data and things like that. But it really is the passion of those exiting owners, the founders that see it as their mission to give back to the business, give back to the employees, give back to the local community. The way they see businesses being done in a different way, being more caring, more listening, and just the fact that businesses and the business owners become huge advocates and shouting about the importance of employee ownership and why it matters. And I find that really, really exciting.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, we shout about it all the time, don't we, Emmy?
Yes, no, we do.
We do. Yeah, we do. And when we're talking to candidates, actually, and we're working with businesses who are employee owned, it's such a great thing to talk about. which is why we always try to encourage people, don't we, to kind of do your research and see which employee-owned businesses are out there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Paul and Howell, when this was proposed to them, it felt right because they really do care. Yeah,
definitely the best model for us.
Yeah,
wasn't
absolutely.
it? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Christina, what about you? What's been the most surprising thing?
I think it's the, I suppose, respect and duty you feel to your fellow colleague because you're working for them as well as them working for you. So I think that's something you have a responsibility to them. You're not saying that every day, but it's a feeling that you have, a responsibility. I think the ability that we have, 1% of our profits go to charity. We have a charitable fund, and that's really positive. And I'm in the charity group, and I love working with that and, arranging activities and, giving our money away to support local charities. I think that's a wonderful thing. So, and we didn't really do that in my previous organisations. So I think these sort of things, coming together, but also spreading out, ensuring that people know about employee ownership, spreading the benefits, supporting new possibly employee owners. My colleague Gav, who is our culture and employee ownership champion, he supports a lot of new businesses who are, thinking of transitioning. I think that's really important to speak to people who've been through the process. We're lucky we went through in 2011, so it's well established.
Oh, wow.
In Aber Instruments, and we have a hybrid model. But it's a new thing, a daunting thing to people. So I think it's really important as people who've gone through it, previously, is to support those other new people. And I think that's what it is. What's surprising is the supportive community out there for others.
Yeah. Definitely, because obviously we're still quite new. I don't think I even know everything about what employee ownership can bring to us.
It's like being part of it. It's like being on a journey, isn't it? I think all together. And,
no, definitely, because
it's only been positive, really, hasn't it? But if any organisations or any business owners out there are listening and are now thinking, oh, actually, that sounds like something we could do, where can they go? How can they find out the information? What should they do?
So if they're based in Wales, they could, sort of come to us for support. Welsh Government funders, as I mentioned earlier, to provide support to business owners to help them through this process. But obviously, initially, just to find out a bit more about it and to explore the different options available to them. I think, Christina mentioned there how the lovely Gavin at Aber Instruments is sort of very open to talking with other business owners, so we can connect people with others that can, so they can speak confidentially about, how employee ownership is working for them. And Rhodri, I think probably the best way to do it maybe is to look for our details on Employee Ownership Wales website, if you Google that.
Fab.
But and in England, then there's the Employee Ownership Association, which is like the umbrella organisation for employee-owned businesses. So that's always a good point of call for anybody that's not in Wales.
Amazing. Fab. Thank you. Honestly, thank you so much for your time today. It's been really, really insightful and just so lovely to hear all of the positive things that are coming out of, employee-owned trusts. It's just been, super insightful, super helpful. And I just think anybody who's listening to this have probably got so much out of it and are probably either wanting to join an EOT or maybe wanting to kind of, set one up. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. And I think it might be worth saying as well, I think sort of like you mentioned earlier, Emmy, that, Hope is quite new to employee ownership, whereas obviously Christina in Aber Instruments, you're a bit further down the line, obviously. So, but I think some organisations have got a good, healthy sort of culture before they go down this route, where employees already are being engaged with and they feel that sort of, I suppose, sort of well-being, sense of well-being in their organisation. others that we work with are maybe sort of just embarking on that road, you know. But I think for me, what's nice is that everybody that works in an employee-owned business has got the potential to shape what it looks like as well. So I think whether they're at the very beginning of the journey or further down the line, you can help shape it and enjoy it as well, you know.
Yeah, which is brilliant. So yeah,
I would just add, if you're a business and you're thinking about employee ownership, and it's been demonstrated by Christina today and you at Hope, is to reach out to other employee-owned businesses. It really is a community of businesses in Wales, especially. So I would, if you're based in Wales and you're looking to find out more about it, obviously come and talk to us, talk to your solicitor and accountant, but reach out to a friendly employee-owned business and learn what it's about.
And that's the other thing. It is that community, isn't it? Which is another benefit to being an employee interest. It's you are part of a business community then. So that in itself is amazing for lots of reasons. Fab, brilliant. Oh, well, thank you so much. It's been great. It's been lovely. Thank you. I've really enjoyed it.
You're welcome.
And that's a wrap on this episode of the Career Clinic. A huge thank you to Branwen, Rhodri and Christina for sharing their time, knowledge and brilliant insights with us.
We love diving into the world of employee ownership, from the practicalities of setting up an EOT to the cultural shift it brings to a business. So inspiring. If this episode sparked your curiosity or gave you food for thought, we'd love to hear from you. You can follow us, share the episode, or leave us a review. It really, really helps to spread the word. And if you've got a topic you'd like us to cover or a question for a future episode, drop us a message. We're all ears. Thanks for listening, and remember, your career journey is yours to shape.